Hi, my name is Jam, and welcome to another Bishoujo action figure review. Today we're going to look at a new Mai Shiranui action figure by a Chinese company called XIII Toys. Now this isn't actually an officially licensed figure, so technically the figure's name is Dragon Fire Dance, but everyone knows who this is supposed to be. I don't know the actual release date on this figure, but I received mine in July of 2022, and I bought it for around $60 US. As you can see, the box is very plain and it's pretty compact, being smaller than the standard Figma box. Since this isn't a licensed figure, there is of course no mention of Mai's name or the games she appears in. There isn't even an image of her on the box, only a silhouette. The name of the figure, Dragon Fire Dance, is written in Chinese on the sides, but on the other sides it just says XIII Toys along with various warnings. Opening the box, we have the figure and accessories stored in a plastic tray. However, 3 extra faces are in a baggie under the tray. Everything seems pretty well protected and collector-friendly. A nicer box to look at would have been better if you like displaying your boxes, but I understand how XIII Toys would want to avoid that since it's unlicensed. We'll talk about all the extra accessories later, so for now, let's look at the figure. Sculpt work is actually not bad. I wasn't sure what to expect from this company I've never heard of, but I'm liking what I see. The design looks to be based on Mai's appearance in King of Fighters 13, where she had a more anime look, so it's more on the simple side, but that's not a bad thing considering the scale. Mai comes with a total of 6 different faces, which is more than a typical figure usually comes with, and that's because it's actually 2 sets of 3 expressions, where one set has a more anime appearance and the other looks slightly more realistic. The anime set has a rounder face, a more subtle nose, and bigger eyes, while the more realistic faces are narrower, have a slightly more realistic nose, and smaller eyes. At first I thought the differences were too minor, but you can definitely tell them apart. I prefer the anime style faces, but it's nice that they gave you an option to suit your preferences. There are 3 different expressions for each set. You get the normal smiling face, a winking face, and a face with the eyes closed. And this face also has a slot so she can hold her fan in her mouth as she tends to do in the game. While having the option to choose between 2 different styles is nice, I kind of wish there were a wider variety of faces in just one style instead. For instance, a face where her eyes are open and can also hold the fan in her mouth would have been more useful since she does quite a few actions with her fan in her mouth. Or maybe a more angry face that really captures the intensity of the heat of battle. In any case, I would have preferred a wider variety of expressions over having 2 different styles. Mai's hair is adequately detailed for this scale, and you can remove her hair to help facilitate the switching of faces, similar to a Figma figure. Unlike a Figma though, her faces are actually the main part of her head, so these actually attach to the neck joint themselves, and then the hair is attached to them. It works fine this way, and I don't really mind it, but articulation-wise there could be some improvements, which I'll get into later. Mai's outfit is not sculpted plastic, but is made of real cloth. Her body underneath the clothes is shaped pretty accurately to Mai's designs. Mai is known for her curvy body, and that is well represented here with her prominent hips and chest. Speaking of her chest, at first I thought it was too gravity-defying, but I think it works really well with the cloth outfit to give the appearance that her gi is helping to hold her chest up, and it does match up with the official KOF13 artwork. And I love how taut the outfit looks here with that little gap between the gi and her chest. In case you were wondering, there is sculpted detail at her chest and privates, so this figure can become very not safe for work if there is a wardrobe malfunction. As for the rest of her body, there is no real muscle definition, but Mai's character design in KOF13 is more about beauty than brawn, so it's actually accurate. I do have issue with her biceps though. The joints from the elbow and shoulder articulation appear to be warping the bicep and giving it a sort of wavy, buckled appearance. Going back to Mai's outfit, it's based on her King of Fighters 13 look, so she doesn't have the rope that usually goes around her shoulders, she only has one large tassel hanging from the back of her belt, and she has a big white bow with 2 red stripes at the ends. The white accents are printed or painted on, and I'm really impressed that her outfit looks this good at this scale. And there's a reason it looks good. There's no stitching. The edges aren't finished, save for one along the bottom part of her outfit, and even then it's not finished properly with thread, but is just folded over and glued down. Leaving out the stitching gives a more appealing look, since the stitches would not only make the outfit physically thicker, but the stitches themselves would look out of scale. Also, making the outfit non-removable helps keep it as thin as possible. Mai's belt is secured with glue and not Velcro or some kind of fastener, as those would just make it much thicker and out of scale. Her big bow is also glued on top of the belt. As I was taking photos of the figure and posing it, I noticed that part of her outfit came loose, so I decided to undo the belt and take a good look at how the gi is constructed. It's composed of 2 separate pieces, and her gi is glued down to her abdomen. That's a bit of a problem when you move Mai's upper torso. She tends to pop out of her outfit. So while this outfit looks great, it's hard to pose Mai without her chest popping out, and because the edges aren't finished, I do worry that they will fray over time, but it does seem like the edges are seared so that they won't do that. In any case, there's no denying that this method of doing cloth outfits is pleasing to the eye. Another positive about her outfit is that her big tassel has a wire in it, and that was one of my complaints about the Genesis Eamon Mai figure, which didn't have a wire in her tassel, so good on 7 Toys for doing the proper thing here. This allows you to put her in more dynamic action poses, and can also help simulate weight if you're draping it over something like her arm. Speaking of poses, let's look at her articulation. Starting from the top, she has a ball-jointed ponytail, which allows you to pose her hair as if it were blowing in the wind or being affected by whatever fighting move she's doing. There's also a simple ball joint where the head attaches to the neck, and unfortunately they didn't make enough room for this joint to be effective. Usually the head cavity has more room around the connection point, which allows for the head to tilt at a greater angle, but here there is very little room for the head to tilt, to the point where it's practically just a swivel point. The shoulders are ball jointed where they attach to the torso and have hinges for lifting the arm outward. The joint pegs into the bicep to create the bicep swivel. The elbow hinge is pegged into the lower bicep and forearm, and it bends well past 90 degrees and can swivel above the elbow. The wrists are likewise hinged and can swivel above and below the joint, allowing the hands to bend 90 degrees and swivel to whatever position you need. The upper torso is on a barbell ball joint, allowing for tilting in all directions. There is no waist articulation. The hips are ball jointed, but their range of motion is a bit limited due to the way the hips are sculpted. They're really prioritizing aesthetics over articulation here, and there isn't enough room for the legs to bend at the hips. You can get more range of motion by twisting the leg around, but at a certain point it just looks weird. I think they should have used a technique that Figmas use, where you can pull down the legs to create more room for them to move. The knees are hinged and bend past 90 degrees with just a little room for swiveling above the knees. The ankles are hinged and can swivel above the joint and have ankle tilts below the joint. Everything below the neck is basically the same articulation as a Figma, so if you enjoy Figmas, you'll enjoy this figure. The only negatives are the limited neck tilting and constrained hip articulation. On figures like this one, which is based on a fighting game, I like seeing if it's capable of poses from the game, and for the most part, you can approximate her poses pretty well. Mai has a very unique fighting stance, and you can recreate it decently accurately with this figure, provided she's facing the left, since only her right hand can hold the closed fan. The face with the eyes closed is good for recreating the Kageru no Mai super move, which ironically is not in KOF 13. As I mentioned earlier, face with the eyes open and fan in the mouth would have been more useful. Moving on to accessories. Well, besides the extra faces, which we've already talked about, there's a total of 6 different hand sculpts. Besides the left and right fists that come on the figure, you get a left hand in a ninjutsu sort of pose, an open right hand that can also hold the open fan, an open left hand, and a gripping right hand for holding the closed fan. They all look fine and have the handguards sculpted to them. The only issue is that the open hand that holds the open fan looks a little bigger than the other hands, but that's really a minor nitpick and I don't really mind it. Speaking of fans, you get an open fan, a closed fan with a little tab so you can put it in Mai's mouth, and a regular closed fan which she can hold in her hand. They all look good and fit in her hands and mouth pretty tightly. Lastly, you get a simple stand which is about as basic as you can get. It's just a small disc which pegs into either foot to help the figure stand. This is the weakest item in the set by far. It works, but just barely. It reminds me of stands used for vintage G.I. Joes and Star Wars figures, but worse. If it were bigger, it would be more stable, so that's the first change I would make, but overall, this just feels lazy. Paintwork on Mai is adequate. Nothing mind-blowing here, but everything looks clean and crisp when it should be, like the white trim of her outfit and the red stripes on her bow. Her skin also has some shading here and there, which gives the plastic a more realistic flesh tone. Her various heads are also painted well, with rosy cheeks and sharply defined eyes and eyebrows. I haven't noticed any major paint errors or messiness, so overall a good job on paint. So how does this figure look and work with other action figures? First of all, this figure is smaller than I would have liked. She measures just around 5¼ inches, and unfortunately that's shorter than most comparable Figmas. It would have been nice if Mai could stand head-to-head with SH Figuarts Chun-Li or Figma Kasumi, but as you can see, she's a good deal shorter than them. Mai does fit in pretty well with some other Figmas, but your mileage may vary depending on which figures you have. I don't have the Figmas of Kyo Kusanagi or Iori Yagami, but hopefully she fits in well with them. Mai definitely doesn't fit in well with larger figures like Marvel Legends, NECA, or Storm Collectibles, and they look hilariously oversized compared to her. Mai's neck joint is interesting in that you can remove the ball joint, leaving behind a hole. I was hoping that it would be a perfect fit for a Figma neck joint, but the hole is a little too big. Putting a Figma head on Mai's body does look good though, and being able to remove the joint is a good starting point for potential customization. The peg from Mai's neck joint is too big for a Figma neck, so you won't be able to put Mai's head on a Figma body without some customizing. Her head is too small anyway, so it probably won't look good. The wrist pegs for Mai are very similar to Figma wrist pegs, and I had no trouble using Figma hands on Mai, and vice versa. Mai has no hole in her back, so Figma stands or other stands that use 3mm plugs won't work with her. Overall, I think this is an excellent figure, and if you're a Mai fan, then you will definitely want to pick this up, even though it's not an officially licensed figure. The quality is pretty high and very comparable to a Figma, especially in terms of the articulation, though the neck and hips could use some improvement in terms of range of motion. The amazing looking cloth outfit is a big plus in my book, and it's what helps this figure capture Mai's sex appeal. That is, when it can actually contain it. Plus, it's just kind of cool to see a cloth outfit look this good at this scale. All is not perfect, of course, and her small stature is probably the biggest gripe, and that Dream SNK versus Capcom versus DOA matchup won't look as good because of it. The fact that her outfit is glued together can be an issue, especially if it starts to come loose, but it's fixable with super glue and a lot of patience. The two sets of face styles is an interesting choice, but I would have preferred more expressions. The included stand is also a weak point in the set, but hey, it's better than no stand at all. Even with those drawbacks, I am still really enjoying this figure, and it's a great little representation of Mai from King of Fighters 13. So that about wraps it up for this review. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. It really helps me and the channel out. And thank you for all the comments you guys have been leaving. It's been really encouraging and helps me make better reviews. Leave a comment below if you have this figure or are a Mai fan. And I'll catch you in the next review. Jam out.